Good morning and afternoon, everybody. The man behind the logo here, Joe Aiello, Director of Community Engagement Organizing for the association. I'd like to welcome you to this Texas Rail Advocates and Rail Passengers crossover briefing. Just to let everybody know, we are recording this, so please stay on your best behavior. You can keep your cameras on if you want. We will have a Q&A later on. You can raise your hand, ask your questions, or if feeling a little shy, please type in the chat, and I'll be monitoring it for later on. So that said, I'm going to introduce Tom Compson, a Rail Passengers board member, for a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and thanks for setting this up, Joe and Sean. I thought it was a good time to give everyone an update on what's going on both the national and state levels with passenger rail, because there's an awful lot going on. There's been a lot going on for a couple years. And if y'all are like me, it's really hard to keep all the alphabet soup straight, and repetition is good. But this won't all be repetition. There's new stuff. There always seems to be breaking news on the passenger rail scene, some of it good, some of it not so good. And so I wanted to give everyone an update, and I couldn't ask for two better people to do that for us than Sean Jeans-Gail, the RPA Vice President of, I've got to get the title right, Policy and Government Affairs, and Peter LeCody, who's the Texas Rail Advocates President. So Sean's going to start off for us by giving us an overview of what's going on at the federal level, both with the various FRA initiatives and what's going on the Hill. And then Peter is going to sharpen the focus for us on what's happening in Austin and in Texas. And then we're going to kind of close with a call to action. I mean, what can we each do and all do to move the ball forward on this? There's just never been a greater opportunity than what we have now, both nationally and Texas, to really make a difference. So with that, Sean, please take it away.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for organizing this. First of all, we always appreciate our volunteer leadership, stepping up, helping us connect with rank and file members, and also thanks for Peter, our chairman emeritus, for bringing the TRA folks on. I am sorry. I'm gonna see if I can play from start. Does that look good for everyone? Hopefully. Cool. So yeah, this was a month and a half ago, 2 months ago that we planned on doing this update, and it just so happened that we had a pretty big hearing on Wednesday at the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So we do have breaking news. We have the latest updates on the IIJA money, how it's being spent. So I'll be able to touch on the national level, and then talk about a couple of bills that were just introduced, talk about the funding picture, both for CapEx, but also operations, which should be interesting based on last year's legislative action. And then, try to provide some context with what that means for reauthorization and answer the question of, can we keep this train rolling? So if you have any questions, we will have a Q&A at the end. I think Joe mentioned that. Feel free to drop things into the chat in real time. But I wanna be respectful every time. So I'm just gonna get started. So yesterday's hearing focused on two big issues, which is, where is the money going from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law? And is there enough transparency on how these dollars are being spent? I think the first question is one that is very pressing. It's going to be hard to. Amtrak is like a battleship, It doesn't have great cornering. It's got a lot of inertia. We went from the last 50 to 60 years of Amtrak kind of squeaking by on starvation rations, and then all of a sudden, thanks to the BIL, we have this actual healthy CapEx budget. And Amtrak wasn't going to just be able to turn on the faucet overnight. So what we have seen is that even though the IIJA was passed in 2021, we are just the end of 2021. I'll be clear, November. We are just starting to see those funds come out the door. So you can see here, Stephen Gardner yesterday before House T&I reported on the CapEx trend line. You can see it's quite dramatic. 1.6 billion in FY19 to 5 billion this year, and that's going to increase to another by another 3.3 billion to 8.3 billion total in FY25. That comes with increased operating costs, of course. You got the legal financial management. You got to hire a bunch of human beings to run these programs. These are very specialized positions. These are specialized crafts. So that is, while Amtrak was able to report healthy year-over-year revenue growth on the ticket side, they also are reporting, and it looks like we're on track for record ridership. They're also saying, it's not necessarily going to be this case where all of a sudden we're on the glide path self-sufficiency, which is, from our perspective, fine. We think of them as a public agency, public utility, much like the air traffic control program. You don't expect it to make a profit. You expect it to be a good steward of public funds. But what 8.3 billion or 5 billion this year, rather, that's an impressive number, but I think it's important to know like what that actually means. And I was very happy to see in Amtrak's legislative grant for FY25 and also in Stephen Gardner, Amtrak's CEO's testimony yesterday, that they really dove down into the details of where that money is going. I've listed a couple of the tunnel and bridges and the station projects in this slide. I'm not going to go into each of these documents. If you look at this week's hotline, we'll have a comprehensive list. But I think it's worth pointing out that these are major hubs. These are major corridors and choke points on the Northeast Corridor. It is, of course, the case that the Northeast Corridor is overrepresented because that is where Amtrak owns its right of way. For national network projects, we're going to see a lot more money on the equipment side, which will be next slide. But they'll also be represented through the federal state program, which Peter's going to get into a little bit, which has the states as the leading agency. And Amtrak will be a partner there, but they won't be as much of a lead. We could also see some new exciting things coming with equipment. I had to have two columns here. The Acellas are finally being tested after a long delay with Alstom and the FRA kind of haggling over the computer modeling. These trains were originally scheduled to enter revenue service 2021, so they're 3 years over date. But Amtrak is cautiously optimistic that Alstom will be able to clear that testing, and we will start to see revenue service later this year. So stay tuned. Production of the Siemens-built Amtrak Aero. Those are going to be for the Northeast Regional, as well as some state-supported services in the East and the Amtrak Cascades. They are being built. It's obviously, there's two real major equipment manufacturers in the U.S. right now, Siemens and Alstom, and they are dramatically oversubscribed. So we're excited to see Siemens expanding its manufacturing footprint in the U.S. They're going to open a manufacturing plant in North Carolina. That is good news for the people of Carolina. It's good news for America's passengers. This is what the IIJA was supposed to do, was invest in, American industry, American workers. And we're starting to see some of those green shoots. So, we'll hopefully see projected initial service in 2026. The Siemens continues to deliver on the venture cars for the Midwest and California state support services. There has been some difficulty with the welds as they've ramped up production. And so that has delayed some of those deliveries. We are hearing that is being ironed out. So again, you'll start to see more of those hit the road this summer. The long distance fleet is obviously very long in the tooth. We're going to see the request for proposals finalized. It's currently being considered by equipment manufacturers. They're looking at bi-levels, which is good because that maintains the existing capacity, but is also more difficult because no one's manufacturing bi-levels currently in the US. So this is going to be a new production line. Amtrak's going to finalize that contract probably spring 2025. That's a little delayed. They were hoping to finalize that contract by end of this year. But the manufacturers asked for more time to look at some of those specifications Amtrak issued. Locomotives, those are continuing to be delivered. We continue to see the restoration work for rail cars that damaged in grade crossing incidents and derailments. Also, some of the rail cars that were mothballed during COVID, they have taken longer to bring back online. That was something we warned about. But, Amtrak felt during COVID that they had to dramatically cut operational costs, and so they stored those, and we're paying the price for that now. It's disappointing, but again, it's part of a longer ramp up. We're also continuing to see the $28 million refresh of the existing cars in the Superliner fleet, new carpeting, new upholstery, rehab of the bathrooms and dining car facilities, and the cafes rather. So all exciting things. The equipment continues to be that kind of bleeding edge where you may not notice upgrades to signaling outside of better reliability, shorter trip times. But when you see those new cars out in the network, it does feel very exciting. Amtrak is also taking the lead on some new and upgraded service. There's the Mobile to New Orleans project where they're upgrading grade crossings. And of course, 4 routes selected as part of the Corridor ID program. Extension of the NEC to Long Island, Texas Central, Dallas and Houston. That's very exciting. Peter will talk more about that, as well as daily service on the Cardinal and Sunset Limited. So, I want to turn it over to Peter here pretty quick, but this is kind of the best of times, worst of times scenario. We have, advanced appropriations for the first time really ever. So we have a 5-year guaranteed, predictable, dedicated source of funding. It is not insignificant. $1.2 billion for Amtrak Northeast Corridor State of Good Repair work. $3.2 billion for Amtrak National Network State of Good Repair work. That's going to go towards Chicago, towards station maintenance bases, as well as new equipment, railroad crossing elimination grants, and then the big pot of discretionary funds that states can compete for, $7.2 billion. But what is not covered in this is operating funds. And that is, again, it's how Amtrak pays its locomotive engineers, its maintenance crews, its onboard personnel. It's how they pay the utility bills to keep the lights on at the stations. So, last year we had a big legislative fight where the House GOP leadership proposed a budget that slashed Amtrak funding by 76%. That would have been a disaster It's hard to see how they continue to run trains when they get their operating account slashed by, 2/3. It is a strange policy proposal to provide them with all this capital funding, but then not give them the money to run the trains. Fortunately, we had a bipartisan coalition in the House with a noticeable block of House Republicans from New York and New Jersey turn back that proposal. I am hoping that has been noticed by House leadership. We will see. There is going to be a tough funding top line faced, so I expect to be disappointed, but also I'm hoping that they don't throw out like an imaginary ridiculous number like we saw last year. And then, of course, we can look to the Senate to have that battle. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to get into this Gantt chart. I'll just say that there's an open notice of funding opportunity for the Northeast Corridor Fed-state partnership. Selections will probably come in fall 2024. The deadline for applications is July 15th. For the national network discretionary grants, again, these are the ones that the states have to pursue. It's going to be, and last year we saw Virginia, North Carolina, California, and Nevada were the big winners. Hopefully we'll see some Midwestern, some Southern states this time around. They're going to open that sometime fall 2024, and the selections, don't know. Probably early 2025 based on past patterns. I would like to just kind of push our map of the long distance and corridor ID work that is being done. Again, Peter's going to talk more about these programs, but I think we did one of our interns, Noah Kahan, did a really good job of kind of disambiguating these different programs and visualizing them. Finally, we did see two very important pieces of legislation come out. Introduced yesterday in the House, the Amtrak Transparency and Accountability for Passengers and Taxpayers Act by Chairman Nels from the Rail Subcommittee. This requires Amtrak to publish a list of meeting dates, to live stream their board meetings, to post publicly some of the minutes and meeting agendas. This is a lot of what we have been calling for. And in fact, I think I might have conflated our list of requests with Chairman Nels's statutory requirements. So I apologize. I will follow up and clarify with that. But we are pleased to hear that Amtrak has reached out to us about this. We have been really focused on this for a long time, and they said they are not waiting for Congress to act. They're looking at near-term steps they can take to meet some of these requests, some of these requirements as outlined. I think that's very helpful because when you look at how long it takes legislation to move through Congress and the near-term timeline for spending a lot of this IIJA funds, sooner the better. We also saw, again, Congressman Mark Molinaro introduced the Amtrak Executive Bonus Disclosure Act, which requires Amtrak to notify, brief Congress and the public on executive bonuses and explain the metrics and criteria used to determine the bonuses. There's more I can say about that, but I'm already over time. So I will turn it over to Peter. And Peter, I'm sorry if I went a little long.
Sean, perfect. I appreciate it. And that was a great overview of the national level and picked up a lot of good information there too. So thank you very much. Now, let me try to shift over to what I've got and let's give this a shot here, see if we can bring that up on the screen. Tom shaking his head yes, so I guess we're good to go. All right, very good. And I do appreciate Rail Passengers Association for making us part of this special presentation. Going to talk about quite a few things here that are going on in Texas. And let's see here. Oops. All right, I'm getting a little bit of a There we go. Okay, good deal. All right, this is a quick overview of what I'll have for you today. Going to take a look back at our 2023 legislative session in Austin and how close we got to getting some passenger and freight rail funding. Also going to touch on the FRA daily long distance study. The Dallas meeting just concluded this week. I'll mention the corridor ID grants that have gone to TxDOT, Amtrak, the Southern Rail Commission, and the North Central Texas Council of Governments. Also, Amtrak and Texas Central. Is this going to be a good marriage or not? We have to wait and find out. And there's a little Dallas drama involved if you've been following the news the last day or so on high-speed rail through downtown Dallas. We'll talk about corridor programs that seem to be popping up. There's a couple county judges between Austin and San Antonio that are very interested in promoting passenger rail on a regional basis and across the I-35 travel corridor. The TxDOT Texas Rail Plan is coming up for its refresh, and I'll brief you on that. And finally, why you should not be a couch potato this year. It's going to be a very busy year. All right, 2023, we had a chance to get some potential rail funding through the Rail Relocation Fund, Rail Improvement and Relocation Fund, which voters, by the way, unanimously approved in the early 2000s by a constitutional amendment. However, the legislature decided not to put the first dollar into the RRIF fund. And we've been fighting to get some funding in there ever since, not only for passenger, but freight rail improvement. Because here in Texas, you're going to have to know that if you're talking about conventional rail, you will be running on freight railroads. And we have to respect the fact that they have shippers. They need to get their goods to market. But if we can work with them for a public-private partnership benefit, we can have some passenger rail service as well. So a $200 million, I had 200,000 in there with a K, it's actually M for million, was proposed in a rider during the last legislative session. And unfortunately, the Speaker of the House and our Lieutenant Governor got into a tiff. And every single rider, not only the one we had in there from a couple of legislators who were very interested in this, but everyone's rider across the board was tossed. So we're going to have to go back to the well again this coming session. What's going on now? We've been working with the Texas Department of Transportation and also our Texas Transportation Commission, and helping to understand, help them understand what is going on with freight and passenger rail and what our needs are here in the state of Texas. Understand too that some of this funding that we have been talking about is not for high-speed rail because a bill has been passed, had been passed in previous sessions that prohibits the state of Texas from putting the first dollar into high-speed rail. So these are all conventional passenger rail projects. So we did have TxDOT apply for some corridor ID programs, and let's start talking about them. All right, first of all, we have the Amtrak Connexus program, which Amtrak came out with over a year and a half ago. And TxDOT, we are very pleased to see that they did apply for corridor identification grants. And these are for scoping. In other words, this is the first baby step in a long process to develop these passenger rail corridors here in Texas. But we were very pleased that Mark Williams, the executive director of TxDOT, sent a letter to Amit Bose at the Federal Railroad Administration outlining what he would like to see in the future. And TxDOT was granted 2 of their 3 corridor identification $500,000 grants to kick this off. The first one, of course, was between Dallas to Houston by way of College Station for conventional rail, okay? There was another one between Houston and San Antonio, which was also awarded to TxDOT. The one that TxDOT did not receive was the one between Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and San Antonio. And the reason for that was there was a technical error in the one that TxDOT submitted to the FRA. They are going to go back. There is going to be a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity, coming out in 2025. And this may be the last one too, because remember the IIJA that Sean was talking about, we're already in year 3. So we do need to get TxDOT to apply. They indicated that they will be going back to the well. They are actually doing a little background work so they can do some catch up if the FRA designates them to approve that. The Southern Rail Commission and Amtrak received a corridor ID planning grant between the Dallas-Fort Worth market and Meridian, Mississippi. Now, that would be part of the line that runs from New York down to New Orleans, called the Crescent. And this would be an extension from Meridian, Mississippi to Dallas-Fort Worth. So that one also is in progress. And we also have a Dallas-Fort Worth to Houston, or Dallas to Houston high-speed rail grant, which went directly to Amtrak. This is, of course, the line that Texas Central had been developing and, got down pretty close to the 10-yard line. That is something we'll discuss again here coming up in just a little bit. We're also glad to see that TxDOT also submitted some letters of approval, letters of support for a couple of other projects as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The map on the left-hand side you're looking at is the proposed network of preferred routes. The FRA has concluded now 4 meetings here in the central portion. They have another one going on this week. And then when they gather up all of their information to submit to Congress, we expect to see a report sometime by the end of this year. And there is a website to go to for that. We have a story that's posted on the Texas Rail Advocates website where you can pick up that information. Interestingly enough, if you look at the proposed network, and this would be for a daily round-trip train, and this is going to serve a lot of rural communities. It's going to serve a lot of underserved areas that had lost passenger rail service within, who knows, the last half century or even longer. And this can help restore service to places like Midland, Odessa, to other areas in Oklahoma and out to the east of us. And if you look at the map there, it looks like a spider web coming out of the Dallas-Fort Worth market. Now, who knows how many of these 15 proposed networks, a network of preferred routes, are going to be established. And this is going to be a long-term proposal. Folks, this is not something that happens overnight. But this is a vision from the FRA, which was required under the infrastructure law. And if this would occur, I would expect Dallas to become kind of a mini hub for passenger rail traffic, not only originating in the region, but transferring through Dallas-Fort Worth. There's a line down to San Antonio, one to Houston, traffic up to Denver could be possible, a line up to Minneapolis-St. Paul, several to the East Coast, and one out to the West Coast as well. So very, very interesting the way this has shaped up so far. This is where, we need to make sure that we follow this and definitely give our support to it on an ongoing basis. What we don't have right now with all of these projects, the Amtrak Connexus, the Corridor ID programs, the preferred long-distance daily Amtrak service, is a state match. Because without the state match, we're not going to be able to get to the next step. For instance, on the Corridor ID programs, once this scoping is done, the next step will require a 10% state, 90% federal match. The step after that requires a 20% state match and an 80% federal buy-in. So without the first dollar from the state of Texas, folks, it's going to be tough. And we'll talk about how to get there. All right, let's talk about something that is kind of bubbled up here just in the last 6 to 8 months, and that is a passenger rail advisory committee. Also, if you notice, I crossed out the word commuter. Please do not use the word commuter when you talk about rail between two major cities. It's a regional service or it's an intercity service. And if I have any reporters or anyone from the media on here now, please take the word commuter out of your vocabulary. Judge Brown, Andy Brown in Austin, and also Judge Peter Sakai, who is the county judge, the administrator in Bexar County for San Antonio, have been very outspoken recently. They have established a passenger rail advisory committee. I'm very pleased that they asked me to be on it. We're holding monthly meetings. They would like to go to the legislature this coming session and obtain some funding so we can move this forward. This also is dependent upon TxDOT getting the corridor ID grant for the I-35 corridor, because this could be nicely tied into that as well. Okay, a little bit on high-speed rail. Like I said, Texas Central got down to the 10-yard line. They're in the red zone. Unfortunately, you know, it got to the point where COVID hit them. There's 2 years that went down the drain because of that. The board got a little bit of an antsy feeling and they disbanded. There are still principals around from Texas Central, and I've had conversations with them. Basically, they're operating under the radar right now. They will have to become a little bit more transparent as Amtrak grows with them. And Amtrak now is in the process of determining the feasibility of this project and working with them. And if you were at the Southwestern Rail Conference, or if you looked at the video that we have posted online from our Southwestern Rail Conference back in April, you'll get the gist from Andy Byford, who has had great success with the City of New York and their transportation system, also with the Elizabeth line in London, bringing that on. And I rode on the Elizabeth line earlier this year and once before. This line serves hundreds of thousands of people a day. It was kind of mired in a lot of problems. Byford got there and got it solved, got it open, and it's a great service that takes you across London. He's also known, by the way, as Train Daddy. So if you ever hear that, he got that moniker in New York when he headed up the MTA up there. All right, so the North Central Texas Council of Governments is moving forward with a 40-mile stretch for high-speed rail between Dallas and Fort Worth. If you wonder why in the world would 40 miles make any difference and how fast can you go, that's not the object. And we do need to clear this up for people that have a misunderstanding of why the North Central Texas Council of Governments wants to have this little piece of the high-speed rail program. And that's because it serves as the connector from Fort Worth to Dallas for a one-seat ride to take you down to Houston and to College Station for all the Aggies that definitely want to ride in the future. It also sets the precedent for future rail development on the I-35 corridor. If you want to take a train from Dallas, chances are it will go to Fort Worth quickly and then quickly down to Austin and San Antonio. So that's the reason why the North Central Texas Council of Governments and the Regional Transportation Council are very much in favor of this. There's a little bit of a monkey wrench, which occurred yesterday, and that was at the Regional Transportation Council meeting. We have a story posted upon that on the website for Texas Rail Advocates as well. Dallas said, we don't want a high-speed elevated line downtown. The local council of government said, wait a minute, since March, we've been working on different plans. So please, let's get together. Let's sort this out so we can move ahead, because they're on a very tight federal deadline right now to be able to move this thing forward and get funding in the next NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunities. We're getting a lot of media attention, not only on high-speed rail, but also on our conventional rail programs too. I've had chance to converse with folks from the Texas Tribune this past week or two, with folks from the Guardian over in the UK. They're extremely interested in what's going on in Texas. Bloomberg's had a great article out on high-speed rail, and if you get a chance to, we have the article posted with a link on that, and that's a great background that you could use to understand high-speed rail in Texas. Texas Rail Plan. This occurs every several years. The 2024 update is now in progress. Stakeholders will be meeting in Irving, in San Antonio, and in Houston. This includes the Class 1 railroads, passenger rail entities, municipal planning organizations, rail advocacy organizations as well. The public will have a chance to weigh in on this. So stay tuned for information that happens on the Texas Rail Plan. And the reason why we have a Texas Rail Plan is if you want to apply for federal funds, that is a requirement. So it's important that we have all of the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and every project, whether it be freight rail or passenger rail, listed in the Texas Rail Plan. If it's not in there, the feds say, so sorry. Okay, we're getting to the point here with what you can do. And this is going to be important for this year. There are several things you can do, and you don't have to give money. You can give your time, and actually your time is probably more valuable at this point than any type of funding you could put together. If you attend a city, a county, or an MPO transportation meeting, let them know how you feel and what our needs are in Texas, and get your point across. Know your state representative and your state senator staffers. If you need to find out who they are, if you're not familiar with them, Google, who is my state representative? Who is my state senator? That'll take you directly to it. And make sure if they have events, you try to attend them, you get on their mailing list, and get to know who your staffers are. They do want to know what their constituents think, believe it or not. Raise awareness at civic, business, and social meetings. That's important too. If you belong to some sort of organization, we're always glad, if at all possible, to put on a presentation and talk about the benefits that all these rail projects can bring. Also, if you go to the Texas Rail Advocates website, you can sign up for a free news update. We put one out generally about every 30 days. What we have done also for state funding, and what can help as well, especially in areas where we do not have the support at this time, is to get your mayors and your city councils together for a resolution to support what we call our Fair Share for Rail program. We've had billions of dollars in federal rail grants slip through our fingers. We've been able to document over $19 billion over the last decade that Texas missed out on because we don't have a state match to be able to participate in these federal programs. Many of the grants are on a competitive basis. Many of them are oversold. But if we don't have that buy-in of at least 10 to 20% or more, we will not get the federal funding. Hey, folks, this is how we build highways. We do 80-20 on highways. Why are we not doing this for rail? And that's something I think that that point has to be brought across. So our number one requirement is a state fund to be able to match for federal rail funding. And if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see some of the supporters for the Fair Share for Rail program so far. We have folks as far out as San Angelo who have no passenger rail at all, but they do have connections to go down to Alpine for the daily sunset. The Port of Galveston's included. We have a lot of county commissioners' courts. So we have the East Texas Council of Governments. So we're asking that we would like to populate this list at least 5 to 10 times more than what we have right now for our supporters for Fair Share for Rail. And this gets carried to the legislators in their districts, both at the Senate and state representative level. in Austin. And I do want to thank Rail Passengers Association for hosting this special program. And that takes care of what I have to date right here. And I guess we'll turn it back to you, Tom.
Okay, thanks, Peter. That was excellent. And thanks also to Sean for his overview at the federal level. I'm going to kick off with a couple questions for you, Peter. I'm not, I've only lived in Texas for like 26 years now, so I'm still learning how things work. So my understanding, yeah. So we have a part-time legislature that meets every other year, and this is the year they don't meet, but it doesn't mean things aren't happening, right? There's something I've heard of, and I can't think of the term, but it's essentially where, gosh, you know what I'm talking about. There's like resolutions or something, interim, help me out.
Oh,
Anyway,
the interim hearings.
yeah, so and that can be, as I understand it, an opportunity to get things teed up for the upcoming session. And so what I'm wondering is if there is an opportunity now to be contacting our electeds at the state level and say, hey, we need to get, for example, you know, the state fund teed up for funding next year.
Well, that's a great question, Tom. Matter of fact, in the last interim before the 2023 session, I testified before the Texas House Transportation Committee. And also we had a representative from one of the short lines as well. And what came out of that was the fact that they suggested the Texas Rail Relocation Fund, Rail Improvement and Relocation Fund be advanced in the legislative session. Now, just because it was in the interim report, the interim hearing that went to the Speaker of the House, doesn't mean that it actually can happen. But we had a foothold for the first time at an interim hearing. The interim hearings for the Senate Transportation Committee and also for the House Transportation Committee are going to occur later this summer. The House just announced theirs. The Senate came out a little bit earlier. There is a section in there that does mention, are we equipped in the future to move people and goods through the state of Texas? If, by the way, you have someone on the House Transportation or Senate Transportation Committee in your district, contact them and say, folks, we need to be talking about this in the interim. We've sent some suggestions to the director of the Texas House Transportation and Senate Transportation Committees with some ideas on who should be down there in Austin testifying, and we'll see what happens on that. But yeah, that is important because a lot of what comes out of these interim hearings goes into bills that start to be filed later this fall.
Right. Yeah, and if you miss that window or the later, you know, I hear your chances go down. One more question, Peter, and then I'll open it up for anybody else. You mentioned this fair share for rail program, and I remember seeing that come out. Does TRA have like a standard letter or form that we could share with, say, our county commissioners or our city, city councils, mayors, et cetera, that say, hey, could you guys incorporate this into a resolution, or could you sign on? Is there something you can give us for a starter for that?
We sure do, Tom. We do have a template that's set up, and that can be readily available. If anyone needs that to take to, say, a county commissioner's court or to your city council or mayor, shoot me an email, peter@texasrailadvocates.org, and we'll get it right out to you.
Great, thanks. Okay, I'll open it
Tom?
up. Joe, maybe you can monitor the questions.
Yeah, so Lennon Henry, sorry, has his hand raised.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this fair share for rail program that Peter just mentioned. And it looks like you want the major local bodies, cities, counties, et cetera, to try to join that. A question of what we could be doing to try. I mean, obviously, we would use our contacts with these here in the Austin area, trying to get involvement in that. but they'll of course want to know, well, what's going to happen with that? What do we do? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, of what the Fair Share for Rail program does? It sounds, I got the general gist of it, but they'll want to know specifics of what, I assume this is aimed at the legislature and trying to get that state share that we're talking about.
Yeah, and good to see you, Lyndon. It's been quite a while. We actually carried down a fistful of resolutions during the last legislative session to each of the representatives and the state senators that fell within the supporters districts. What you're looking at here is the Rail Relocation and Improvement Fund, which, like I said, voters approved. This is back in 2005, and it's never had the first dollar put into it by the state legislature. It basically can mean just about anything except TxDOT running a train. In other words, if we want to have grade crossing improvements at dangerous grade crossings and eliminate some of them, if we want to have like a bypass, for instance, taking dangerous chemicals and things out of major metropolitan areas, if we could do like a donut around the Dallas-Fort Worth market rather than taking them through downtown. If we want to have regional rail service, if we want to do and again, it's conventional. We cannot touch high-speed rail because of what the legislature passed that prohibits the state from putting the first dollar in. There's many things that can be done. We can eliminate some choke points like Tower 55, which was a major choke point west of the Mississippi River where trains would back up for 20 or 30 miles. And Amtrak could get delayed getting into the Fort Worth station for several hours. Things like that can be done. There's a bridge down in Beaumont that's over 100 years old. That's a major transcontinental line between the West Coast. It's on the Sunset Limited route. And if that bridge goes out, we're in a world of hurt. That needs to be replaced. TxDOT did a report and study on that years ago, and it's still sitting on the shelf gathering dust. We can't do these things if we don't have the funding to match the available federal funds. So
will this be the major mechanism basically to try to get that 20% state share in general that would do all kinds of things, not just the fixing grade crossing stuff, but some major investment in conventional track? Like we're looking particularly at trying to get this Austin San Antonio corridor service revived, that kind of thing. So that could be basically the organization that we would focus on to try to get some aiming at the legislative sessions to try to get some state assistance for those general plans. Is that right?
Yes, that it's called State Fund 0306. And if you go to the website, we have a Fair Share for Rail segment. You're going to get a lot of good information about the background on Fair Share for Rail. You're going to get the background on the actual language on the fund that was approved by voters, and you'll be able to see what could be accomplished.
Thank you.
Bruce Horowitz, good to see you. I'm guess you're going to ask the question that you put in the chat.
No, I'm going to switch to Texas because I think this would be even more appropriate. I worked for almost 5 years as a deputy project manager on what was called Texas-Oklahoma Passenger Rail Study, but the outcome was really the I-35 corridor, and in particular Texas. And we looked at both what was then called higher speed rail. We don't even want that word in there. It was also called high performance conventional rail as something to lead up to a possible future high-speed rail. We won't say that word, but either of those would benefit so much from a connection that would go from Fort Worth through the Arlington area to Dallas and then connect with hopefully what will be a bit easier to achieve, the Amtrak Texas Central. I just ran into Joe Black at the APTA Rail Conference, and many of you remember the heroic work, how he stuck around when it was just him even trying to get that San Antonio to Austin corridor going. And there's so much opportunity of upgrading. It's a win-win both for freight and passenger to have a regional rail, not a commuter rail, but a short distance intercity service. But you need those matching monies because that 500 grant is nothing. To get to phase 2 and phase 3, you need 10% or 20%, which is still very, very little. It's nothing like some of the 50% matches. I wish you guys luck. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you very much.
I'll just chime in real quick and say, the Federal Railroad Administration has outlined a proposal to provide formula funding for rail development and rail planning to each state. It would be $150,000. It's not a lot. It comes from the Chrissy pot, but it'd be $150,000 minimum per state, and then the excess would be the remainder. I think it's like a $21 million pot from Chrissy, would be divvied up by population. So obviously that would be a big deal for a state like Texas, which has a big population, but not a very well developed passenger rail division. And so these are the kinds of things that we are looking at the federal level to kind of create that consistency, create that state level capacity, lower those barriers to entry for, states who don't have a traditionally extensive rail program such as Texas.
All right. I've always wanted to say this. Stephen, you are on the air.
Thanks. Well, you got your chance. Thank both of you gentlemen for your presentations. I have a question for Sean real quickly here. You mentioned the money allocated for the bi-level superliners. I don't recall what the situation is with the single level Amfleet cars. I don't think those are being refreshed, are they? They're being replaced, am I right?
I'd have to dig into my notes. Amtrak is trying to, I believe, refresh every single one of its cars it's currently rolling on the network. But it's a parallel track for eventually replacing those cars because they are well past their projected lifespan.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, and so there's only so much, slapping on a new coat of paint will do if when you're riding on it, you feel like you're riding on a shopping cart. But let me follow up with you and see if I can disambiguate some of the refresh versus replacement and see where the Venn diagram ends.
Thank you.
A point, if I may, gentlemen. Sean, thank you very much for your presentation. Peter as well. With respect to the interim committee, and I draw upon my experience as a state senator on this. And typically, that there were interim charges done for like select committees. Governor Patrick, I was just reviewing his, and what he did was assign certain tasks to existing committees. And therefore, the Transportation Committee, and I'll read this, Peter, you might want to put this up on your website and make note of it. Assess the implementation of funding appropriated by the 88th Legislature for aviation, maritime ports, international ports of entry, existing rail operations, and public transportation from non-dedicated state funds and federal funds, and make recommendations to ensure these sectors meet current demands and are prepared for future growth. End of quotation. That plays directly into the 90-10, 80-20 piece that we're speaking of, because if you're going to be prepared for future growth, then these funds need to be accessed and be made available, which should be presented to the legislature, coming in the second Tuesday in January coming up, as has been pointed out. It's odd numbered years that we meet for 150 days. So that would be a logical docking point for our presentations, to be made to that's still, yeah, you've got Nichols is still in transportation, at least. Well, at least he is now, until the new seats and new chairmanships are announced. And, if you keep up with our Texas legislature, that is anyone's guess as to how that's going to turn out, coming up in the future. But in any event, I just wanted to clarify that point because that is an avenue that could and should be accessed by the members going forward, and we can look for TRA for some leadership in that respect.
And I
Thank
do
you.
want to recognize you. Thank you. It's Judge Richard Anderson and former state senator Richard Anderson, who's chair of the I-20 Corridor Council. They've been working tirelessly for, oh my gosh, how many years now, getting rail established between Dallas, Fort Worth, and toward Meridian and Atlanta and forward from that. And that is something that looks like it's coming down the road finally, and fingers crossed, hopefully we'll get on a train in a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's finally coming through. And yeah, we've been working on this since 2007. I think Sean either was in high school or in college when we undertook this.
Hey, a quick question for you, Peter and/or Sean. Yeah, we focused on the state match. Does it have to be the state, or can there be local or regional entities that can also provide the match?
Well, I have been told by FRA sources they want to work with one particular entity in each state.
Oh boy.
And in this case, it's going to be the Texas Department of Transportation, and in particular, their rail division. So those are the folks they want to work with.
Got it. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Which I don't think means
it's not impossible.
You can find funding, but it's got to funnel through a single agency. And I'm sure we've seen a more complex funding picture from some of the, say, the Southern Rail Commission. But there needs to be that lead designated agency. We also have seen a request from Amtrak to use some of its funding to provide a match in certain cases where it was partnering with a state or regional authority. Congress has not, as of yet, taken up that proposal.
Yeah, I might add in that respect, Sean, and that's a good point because it's not limited to funding solely originating in the state. It can be in participating jurisdictions because, as you understand from the Carter designation portion of it, councils of government, regional planning centers, they are also authorized to make application for this. But I agree with you that it's probably going to be easier for the FRA to deal exclusively with TxDOT. But I will tell you this, with respect to TxDOT, when so far as highways are concerned, if you want to get their attention, go to them with a local match. It may not be but 5 or 10%. But if you bring 5 or 10% to the table for a highway project in Texas, then that's going to immediately draw the attention of TxDOT. So to the extent these funds could be cobbled together on a regional basis and then approach TxDOT with them, I think that would be advantageous. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks.
Joe, do we have any other questions?
So actually, I want to get to, because I know we're running out of time. There was a question in the chat asking about transportation development credits.
I don't have an answer to that. It's not a program I'm familiar with.
I'm barely familiar with it. We did approach TxDOT a couple of years ago asking about that. Still waiting to get a reply.
So, Peter, this is James. If you'd like some information on that, I'm happy to share it with you. Yeah, offline. It's a little odd. It's not real money, but it works as a soft match. But it's normally Title 23 and Title 49 in the federal world, although sometimes when they come out with grant opportunities, they might explicitly exclude development credits. But anyway, happy to dive in deeper with you if you'd like to. Just, yeah, let me know.
Certainly will. Certainly will. Any avenue we can look at is well appreciated. Thank you. By the way, that was James Bass, former executive director at TxDOT, and now with the it's the Central Texas
Regional Mobility Authority.
Regional Mobility, right? Thank you, sir.
Okay, folks, so I think we're at our time limit here. I really appreciate everybody's participation. I think the highest number I saw was like 78 or 79, although I wasn't staring at that number the whole time, but it's a great turnout. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much, Sean, for your fantastic contributions, not only for this, but ongoing. It's amazing what a difference y'all make. And thank you, Joe, for keeping us on track. And this was good. I hope, I think we'll want to do this again sometime when there's some more stuff to act on. But yeah, do get to know your local and state elected officials, and even more importantly, their staff members, and get familiar with them. I have work to do on that myself, but I think we all see there's a lot of work to be done, and they need to hear from us. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everybody, for attending. As soon as we close the proceedings here, I'm going to upload this video as soon as I can, get it up on YouTube. And I'm sure Peter and Sean will have a follow-up with everybody's slides, and we'll make sure that you guys have the link to this as well, anyone who missed it, and then share it to your own lists down there in the great Lone Star State. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a fantastic Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you on board.
Happy Father's Day.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.